Good morning, everyone. Day 4 at reInvent. Kind of feels like day 40 a bit, but either way, I'm so excited to be here with you today. Joining me in today's presentation, I have two FinOps experts, Ashley Ramatko, the current Director of Business Operations for the FinOps Foundation and a former practitioner herself, and Vic Saluja, FinOps Manager and Cloud Strategist at Cigna. As you guys may have heard through some of the keynotes and the breakouts, there's been a theme of the importance of data, and the importance of analytics and insights to inform your decision-making, each of your organizations. And I think the topic that we're going to cover today, navigating financial uncertainty with actionable FinOps KPIs, ties really nicely directly into that theme. So let's get started. As everyone here is well aware, we have been experiencing a sort of economic limbo in this moment. Earlier this year, we saw inflation reach 40-year highs. We've seen supply chain issues impact organizations' ability to meet consumer demand. We have seen geopolitical events and wars impacting our economy. And interestingly, there's been this question of what will there, won't there be a recession kind of dominating the global conversation. It shouldn't be overlooked that in moments of economic uncertainty, you can see a great deal of innovation arise. And I think that one thing that really sets market leaders apart from market laggards in moments like this is focusing in on that innovation, but also being able to focus in on controlling costs and optimizing spend effectively. All of this has kind of led to some increased scrutiny, most likely on your budgets. As cloud leaders, you might actually see your cloud budgets rising in this moment rather than declining. But regardless of if they're going up or going down, my guess is that you are having to talk about how you are spending every dollar, where you are spending every dollar, and what value it is bringing back to the business. And as cloud leaders, you all have a secret weapon to strengthen your organization's competitive advantage in this moment, encompassed in the unique opportunity that cloud provides us to reduce costs and become much more efficient. So why is cloud your secret weapon? Well, I think the main reason is that every minute in the cloud matters from a cost perspective. You can impact change and impact your savings rate in minutes or seconds after taking an action. If I ask my team tomorrow to deprovision a VM or right-size a VM that we're not leveraging to max capacity, I'm going to realize those savings immediately. Think about that for a second. Cost savings in seconds or minutes. I can't think of any other IT investment or area of spend in which you can realize savings that quickly. I think that we also see cost as unique in that the savings are perpetuated for future months. So waste that I remove from my program today and any associated overspend, we will still continue to realize tomorrow and into the months ahead. Cloud also provides us levers in both usage and pricing, and we encourage you all to take both into account in your cloud procurement and investment decisions. We can look at opportunities for reducing waste by, like I was mentioning earlier, spinning down over-provisioned instances. That's the usage impact. And we can also look to commitment instruments to provide better pricing and pricing savings for our program. Finally, reducing cloud costs comes with far fewer downside impact on your business. If you think about traditional cost-cutting measures, things like hiring freezes, slashing budgets, or unfortunately, as we're seeing in the market today, even layoffs, all of these actions come with a long-tail impact that are much harder to recover from and have that longer recovery time than something like cloud. So that's why we're here today. We want to discuss how, as cloud leaders, you can help your organizations to avoid overreacting in this moment, to stop wasting time on low-impact changes, and to, most importantly, avoid suppressing business growth within your organizations. It's our experience that by leveraging FinOps as your foundation, you can manage cloud costs effectively, you can optimize continuously, and you can set metrics that really measure the value that you're driving for your organization. And we're going to cover a couple of examples of those metrics today. First, we're going to talk about cost efficiency and optimization metrics. Then we'll move to what we're calling Cloud Program TCO. And finally, we'll end with unit costing or unit economics. Vic and Ashley are here with me today to share their real-world use cases and provide some tips and tricks along the way for you to get started with. As you look at your secret weapon and begin to deploy within your organization. I think the best place to start is by grounding us with a quick overview of FinOps in general for those that are a little bit less familiar than others. And for that, there's no better person than Ashley. Take it away.
All right, thanks, Marissa. I'm so happy to be here. So I came to re:Invent last year, and I was saying I was a FinOps practitioner, and everyone's like, what is that? What are you doing? And then I joined the FinOps Foundation, and being back this year, when I say what it is, people know what it is. So it's just amazing. So Marissa mentioned the fact that we now have pricing and usage levers that we have a variable spend occurring in, and we've really never seen this in IT spend before. And so a new practice has emerged, and I said we new, but really it's now a couple of years old, that's helping solve these complexities, and that is FinOps. So what is FinOps? FinOps is a cloud financial management practice, which is really causing a cultural shift within an organization to get a variety of personas to work together to better understand the complexities of cloud so that we can really take maximum benefit of what we're doing in it. And we do this in a few different ways. They're doing education programs for having capabilities like forecasting and budgeting and estimating and continuing to iterate on these capabilities and connect people across the organization to really get real-time data in front of them so they can now make real-time decisions that they previously couldn't do. You will see up here a few elements of the FinOps framework. So let me explain what that is. We are a not-for-profit community that really started out with about 48 members from different organizations that got together trying to solve this problem. And now we're at over 8,000 partners, such as Apptio here, and also end users. And what we do is we get together and we talk about how we can solution around these different capabilities. And one of the first things that we started with was developing a framework that really will help organizations adopt FinOps and figure out what elements they need to put in place. I only have a couple of the structure pieces up here, but starting right away is the core principles, which really talks about the responsibility model. And then we have up on the top corner, crawl, walk, run. This is what we talk about when we refer to where are you on your FinOps journey, where are you maturing? And you'll typically see activities within these capabilities. And then we're learning from each other. We're seeing people that are running and beyond running and learning what they're doing. And then organizations are trying to do that much quicker and get to that spot. The other part of the framework that you see up here is our really cyclical and agile way of thinking, where we constantly want to be informing on things and then organizing that data that people can go ahead and operate and take action. So these are just a few of the elements of the framework. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to finops.org, where we talk about domains, personas, motivations, and we publish a lot of white papers. The reason I'm discussing this now is because you're going to hear this terminology a lot throughout the presentation, so I just wanted to level set. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Marissa that's going to go ahead and explore our first metric.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. All right, let's dive into metric 1. The first metric to consider is really a way to surface indicators of waste within your cloud program. The idea that every minute in the cloud matters is sort of a double-edged sword. You can realize savings very quickly, but on the flip side, you can also see waste and the accumulated overspend mount very quickly as well. Efficiency KPIs can really help you understand where that wasteful spend is happening and spur right-sizing or optimization action to correct it. Think about setting optimization metrics in 2 categories. First, looking at the rates that you are getting from your cloud providers, essentially what you're paying for your cloud. And second, looking at your cloud usage itself. So when it comes to rates, I think everybody in the room probably knows the easiest way to get the best pricing is by leveraging a commitment program, something like an RI or a savings plan. And what we see at Apptio from our customers is they will set a metric around coverage. So essentially looking at their total cloud program spend, and then ensuring that they're trying to capture as much of that within their savings instruments as possible. We'll see customers typically try and set a KPI or a target at about 70%. And that's a great metric to track towards because it means that any additional cloud spend beyond that 70% and being purchased on demand is at a very minimal level. Additionally, when you think about your savings plans, you want to think about, and RIs as well, you want to think about your utilization. What we typically see at Apptio is our customers are trying to get as close to 100% utilization as possible, which means that for your commitment program or your reservation, you are leveraging as much of it as possible. Typically, we'll see metrics set at about 90 or 95%, but again, getting as close to that 100% utilization is really where you want to be. I think that, in terms of changes or modifications that we're seeing to metrics in times of economic uncertainty, I think they also apply to when your business is changing objectives perhaps, or even as you mature your FinOps program, you might look to refine some of these metrics. But what we see is our customers aren't changing the metric entirely. What they're actually changing is fine-tuning those targets that they're looking to achieve. So instead of 70% coverage of your commitment programs and your reservations, they might actually adjust that up to 80 or 85% coverage to really try and maximize the value that they're driving from these commitment instruments. Ashley, I'll toss it over to you next, actually, to talk about metric-driven cost optimization, or MDCO, for those that like to speak in that talk, and talk a little bit about what you're seeing with FinOps practitioners today.
Perfect, yeah. So this is a term that we use. This is a term that we use to really describe the fact that you will have all these optimization recommendations that you can make. Some of them you'll be able to act on, and some of them you won't. But it's really, really important to make sure every optimization we're thinking about what is the metric that's driving it. And so what is the metric? What is exactly the metric? Understanding what's measuring, understanding what target we want, what goal we want. And so our practitioners kind of put together these couple core principles when you're thinking about cost optimization. First one being automate what you're measuring. And what this really boils down to is making sure that you're not having humans pull that data, but you're getting as much out of automation as you can get to. You're automating your reporting, you're automating your single source that engineers are looking at, and that's not changing from team to team, right? The second one is to establish a target. So this is really important. You often, sometimes early days, will see people put up a graph and they'll say, here's how many optimization opportunities there are. But you don't know if it's good or if it's bad. And so that's the idea behind bringing a metric behind it and then setting a target or a threshold from where you want to be. And even when you set targets, you really need to question what's really achievable. And what you need to do here is have conversation with your engineering teams to say, we're seeing all of this, tell me what's realistic, tell me what's possible, and have those conversations and being able to go back to your systems and reset your target based on those conversations. And all of this is underlined with having really good data and having that data drive your conversations. So let me use an example here. You've got an application and you know that you need to right-size it. So you want to make sure your right size recommendations are consistently coming from the same tool and you're getting that data as much as possible in real time. Then when you get that data, you want to process it and understand, is this a realistic target? I'm being asked to move to this instance type. Is this an instance type the organization wants to move to, wants to support? Or I'm given 3 instance types to go to. Does that work with what I have for my reservations, right? So understand what's achievable and then go back to the teams and set that target. So if you have that conversation and they say, you know what, right now I can't resize production. I can't have an outage. I can't take it down for a month, but you're right, I can act on the non-production stuff. Great, we've agreed on a target. We've agreed on what's achievable. That's what we will benchmark you against. And then again, making sure those are all driven by data. I have an interesting example here where I had pulled some recommendations and I was doing some stuff in an observability tool to make sure, this is where we wanted to go. And something happened that week, and it was another 7 days before I got to the engineering team. And I bring him this data, I got it from last week, and I hand it to him, and they say, Ashley, we've already done this. We went into the tool and we did it already. And for me, that was the most exciting moment. People get excited about saving millions and thousands of dollars. I get excited about being able to save $10, $50 when the engineer proactively does it themselves from seeing the recommendations. And that's because they have those metrics in front of them and they know the targets that they need to be achieving. So I just wanted to kind of explain this terminology and then share some of the kind of the core principles that the practitioners have submitted to us. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Vic now. Vic works with Cigna, and he's actually implementing this right now with efficiency and optimization KPIs.
Thank you, Ashley. All right. So as everybody talked about, right, so I'm going to talk about those KPIs that are listed here, but what I want to specifically talk about is that a real conversation that's between a CIO and CTO, right, is a CIO basically comes back, to his business, they ask that if I migrate to cloud, will I save cost? CIO goes to their friend, the CTO, and says, okay, this is what the business is asking me, can you save cost? And the response from CTO is, it depends. Well, so the conversation comes to us saying that, can you be more deliberate about this? So the key thing is that cloud migration is not necessarily cost savings, right? It's cost management. There are advantages of going to cloud, and with this current economic environment, people should not be curtailing their cloud growth, because the advantages are you got speed, agility, innovation, et cetera, right? That still has to take place. But with that comes the cost management, right? So the key for cost management is how do you manage your cost? How do you control your costs? And that's where you come with your KPIs. So listed here are top KPIs that Cigna is utilizing. Of course, these are like your infrastructure KPIs primarily, but you can go beyond that. Right, each of the, like Marissa mentioned, and the F2 Foundation have the finops framework. So these KPIs are classified on those finops framework. And as you can see, each of these KPIs help us manage our cost efficiently. What next in this KPI list is application, not just infrastructure. You got things that you can do even within applications where you can manage your cost. You can fine-tune your RDSs, you can fine-tune your Aurora databases, et cetera, right? So there are levers, but how do you get to those levers? How do you know if those levers is data, data, and data, right? You need the data. You need the right tools. And here we are using Apptio as our partner, which is a great partner for us. FinOps Foundation is also helping us to help us adopt, to promote the FinOps practices, principles, and Apptio is helping us giving the data, enabling the data for us so we can enable our consumers to take action on the data. Okay? So I'll just focus on two specific KPIs. So you saw one in the informed phase, which is tagging efficiencies. So tagging efficiency is the key in two places. One is definitely that you can understand who is consumers of your service, right? At Cigna, we are doing showback and chargeback, both, right? To get the proper chargeback for your cost, you need to know who's utilizing your services. So tagging is a key. So we focus on tagging. We've got automation built on tagging. We encourage our customers with tools to help them enable their tagging processes and automate it for them. And the second one, if you look at this thing, is primarily in the operate phase. We have seen numerous cases where folks launch instances. We have seen like up to $25,000 to $30,000 single day charges, not knowing the visibility of that particular utilization, right? But anomaly detection in operate phase helps us identify what that anomaly is. But you don't stop here, right? So you have to action it. You have to communicate that. Just by doing and putting the KPIs up does not help. It has to be communicated. It has to be action to get the necessary advantage, to get the necessary optimization we can get. But I'll pass it back to Marissa to talk about the total cost of ownership.
Awesome. Thank you, Vic. All right, metric 2. So now that we've set efficiency and optimization targets for the costs found within our cloud provider bills, what I'd like to do is actually extend that out to measure our cloud cost program total cost of ownership. First, I'm going to talk about what I mean by that, and then I'll talk about why it's important. So I think that it is critical to remember that your cloud provider bills only represent a small portion of your total cloud program spend. All of you probably also leverage observability tools, so the fees associated with those tools also are a component of your cloud program TCO. You may also use third-party applications or tooling to help extend the capabilities of your cloud or perhaps help you to manage that cloud. That's where a tool like Cloudability would be represented within your cloud program costs. So you need to account for those costs as well. And then lastly, depending on your cloud footprint, you might have private clouds, you might have additional cloud providers within a multi-cloud environment, and you might also want to bring in labor costs for resources that are supporting your cloud program to get to that full cloud program TCO measurement. So why does this matter? Well, if as cloud leaders you are able to connect your direct cloud costs from those cloud bills with your indirect or shared cloud costs, you are then able to really be able to understand when rising cloud costs, and they're always rising, but you're able to understand when those rising cloud costs are attributed to business growth and innovation, or alternatively, when they could be an indicator of inefficiencies or waste within your program. We've seen customers leverage cloud program TCO in an interesting way as well, kind of taking it that one step further to do some advanced allocation of shared costs and also potentially do a fully burdened cloud cost chargeback to the organization. This is important because it helps to build that team accountability of your cloud program costs and helps everyone feel like they can contribute to making your cloud program as efficient as possible and really keeping an eye on those costs now that they have full visibility into them. Vic, at Cigna, I know that you guys measure cloud program TCO, so I'd love to turn it over to you and have you walk us through what you're going through at your organization.
Thanks, Marissa.
Of course.
All right. So this is a Cigna ecosystem for our FinOps journey. The key thing to us is building partnerships. I don't know if folks must have attended keynote yesterday with Ruba Burno talking about partnership is the key to customer obsession, right? So whether it's external or internal, you have to collaborate. It's part of the FinOps Foundation framework, right? You have to have teams where it's not silos. You have to work with your finance teams. You have to work with your application teams, delivery teams, et cetera, right? And engineering team, which is part of our COE at Cigna. But how do we enable those teams is starting with the left side with tools and technology. As we all know, not a single tool cannot provide everything for you, right? At the same time, you have to choose your tools efficiently. There are discussions about build versus buy also, right? So the key is no matter what you utilize, the key is how do you enable your customers with the data that they can act upon, they can action upon. That's the key. So we are using multiple tools which helps our customers to give them the right data, right tooling, understanding of what they need to work on with our tools and technology stack. The next one is that even though we are using a third-party tools, your cloud providers play a key role. There are things where the cloud providers can help us. You've got your savings plans. Since they're specific to a cloud, right? AWS, that's our primary cloud provider. We have got some intrinsic data that's available natively. So we are utilizing that data and working with AWS. In addition to that, we also have something called our consultancy services. So that's when the new teams that are coming on board, right? How do we enable them? How do you tell them about cloud? How do you tell them about FinOps? How do you tell them about architectures, right? So our consulting services help those teams enable them into their cloud journey. And the last thing, as we all know, A handful of folks cannot scale the services, right? So you need automation. You need automation to help your consumers scale in the cloud. With all these things here, cost comes into play. It's a key thing, right? You have to manage your costs. The finance team has to come into play. So those finance and procurement teams basically help us drive that, understand what the costs are, understand the cost for the consumers is. And other key thing is that you have to ensure that you're integrated with your finance systems, because your CFO or people in the finance only understand the value, right? They don't understand your bits and bytes piece on the engineering side of the house. So you have to integrate for the complete feedback loop for your finance, with your finance teams. I'll pass it back to Marissa and talk about the Cigna ecosystem. Sorry.
That's okay.
Next program. Oh, it's me, sorry. So the next one here is, how do we doing cost allocation? So from cost allocation perspective, it's a journey. What we started with at Cigna, we started first with, I remember when I started the journey at Cigna, we had accounts that were set up on credit cards, right? Folks, and I'm sure people must be familiar with this thing, right? People are opening the credit cards. We did not know what the cloud spend is. So we need to get a point where we had to start getting those folks work with our account teams. That's where our partnership comes with AWS, to tell them that nobody's allowed to open credit card accounts. That's how we came to centralized billing, understand what data, how much spend are we doing in the company. What that helped us is that helped us to get to additional programs like enterprise support program as an example, right? We think from an inbox things that the savings are only attained by doing our KPI management, reducing our idle instances, right? It's more than that. You have to think outside the box. There are private contracts that you can do with the vendors, with your provider, right? That can give you those additional savings. You've got your enterprise discount programs, you've got enterprise support programs, you've got private data, direct connects, et cetera, programs, right? That can also save cost, which is outside the box, outside of your stuff that you have, that you're hosting in the cloud. So that's our first thing, is to understand what our spend is. And the next one is that when we go, it's the crawl, walk, run model that Ashley mentioned, right? Is the next one is to get to, after we get all this information collected, we got the data, is then how we act on the data. So you start with your RI and saving plans management. You got a basic alerting, tooling, forecast budgeting that we're using Apptio to help us get all the data. And then the last thing that you come up is, once you get the show back done, how do you get the costs allocated, right? Which is the last piece, is allocations at scale. This is a journey. You have to evolve in that journey. It's not the one and done all thing. You keep on progressing. You're doing what's next. So if you look at this thing that we were at our walk phase, we were at 80% allocation. At our run phase, we are at 90+%. What we've added to that is automation, right? With our engineering teams, which is a key, which is helping us at real time, providing the information, providing the cost to our consumers. And not just that, it's communication and setting expectations is also a key, because they understand what the cost is now, and they know how their forecast, their budgeting has to be. So when we talk about this total cost of ownership, right, we also need to understand what that cost is itself, right? And that's where we come into, from our Cigna's perspective, what is the total cost? What is the cost comprised of? So there are two sets of costs that are key. One is your direct cost that's coming directly from AWS, right? All your providers that you get the cost, or your basics, all the services, all that is taggable. The second one is your shared cost, or that's not taggable, that are primarily you've got your transit gateway as an example, right? You've got services that go through, it's like your hub and spoke model, where in the legacy or data center world, your hub is your data center and your spokes are your individual sites, right? In the same model, transit gateway is your hub, but that cost that's coming through the pipe, right? You can't tag it. So how do you allocate those costs? Then you've got we are using different tools. all the different SaaS providers. We've got Kafka, Confluent, we have got Databricks, we've got Snowflake, et cetera, right? All that cost. Because end of the day, in their model itself, they're not the actual people who are managing those products. They're not the consumer of the products. They want that cost to be allocated out. And then the last thing is, like I mentioned, enterprise support, right? If you're using a hierarchy, AWS organizations, that comes as central cost. You have to allocate that also out to consumers. So that's how makes your cloud bill. So to understand total cost of ownership, you need to understand what your total cloud bill is, so you can do proper actions, proper forecasting, budgeting, et cetera. It's not that a variable piece. You're trying to minimize your variance in your cloud costs. Back to Marissa to talk about the metric.
Thank you. All right, third and final metric, and I will say I think we saved the coolest metric for last. We want to talk about unit cost. So once you've established your cloud program TCO, what we see is a lot of practitioners are then able to take it to that next level and establish cost per unit, even develop into unit economics, and sometimes even be able to contribute to margin analysis or profitability analysis with that unit cost measurement. I think that unit cost metrics are really cool because they allow you to tie cloud spend directly to the business value that spend delivers. So you're able to think about the cloud costs required to power a customer transaction, for example, or perhaps power 1,000 website visits, or even get to that next dollar of revenue or sales. I think that unit cost metrics allow you to talk about costs of cloud in plain language. It's something that everyone across your organization can understand. You're driving towards a common objective, and it puts cloud costs in that terminology of value, eliminating some of the complexities around talking about pricing or usage or demand, for example. One example that I'd like to walk through specific to unit costing is actually personal to us at Apptio. So Apptio Cloudability is our market-leading cloud cost management and optimization tool. And as you may imagine, or perhaps even deduced from some of the pictures that have been shown throughout the presentation, we process a lot of billing information and process a lot of billing lines. We support some of the largest consumers of cloud, so you can imagine those billing lines being processed represent a huge amount of data flowing through our systems. And for our pipeline team, that presents an opportunity to measure the cost per billing line processed as our unit metric. So what you'll see in the slides here, and I will throw out the disclaimer, these are not real numbers to Apptio, but they are directionally correct in terms of what we've seen. But you'll see in the bottom graph that over a period of about 12 months, the number of billing lines processed grows dramatically, more than doubling. The other chart behind that actually shows that the cost per billing line within that same period drops by about 75%. That's through optimization actions and right sizing taken by our finops team to drive efficiencies into our program and be able to get to the lowest cost per unit possible. By drilling into that view, we can justify our spend easily and show our leadership team that we're spending that money wisely and using it to drive a direct value to our business. I think that is ultimately what we're all trying to do, is be able to show what all of our actions and all of the right sizing steps that we're taking are impacting the business with at the end of the day, particularly from a cost perspective. Vic, I know that unit costs at Cigna is something that your team measures closely, and I'll toss it to you to talk through your example next.
Thanks. So thanks, Marissa. So one thing I want to mention, again, the disclaimer, right? We are currently at Cigna, we are looking at unit cost and application level, right? That's a starting thing that we are looking into, start doing that now. Cigna being a healthcare company, our true unit cost will be like, how much does it cost to subscribe, member subscription, right? We are not there yet. Eventually, the goal would be to get there at how much would it cost for a per member subscription, right? But that doesn't mean we don't start, right? It's steps, it's crawl, walk, run. You have to start somewhere. So how we do it currently is, like I said, at application level. So one of the inputs that we have on unit cost is we have centralized our reserve insights and savings plans purchases. If you centralize that in your account, right, you're not utilizing as a COE. We manage the costs across our different teams. So we are not consumers of those reserves and savings plans. So our goal is to charge those costs back, but be fair on those charges, right? If somebody's using 10%, 15%, whatever that is, or maybe an hour, 2 hours, we ensure we charge back. So what we have done is we have added capability into our tool in Cloudability with proper partnership and automation to get that view for who is the consumer of that particular reservation and who is the owner of the reservation, so that appropriate allocations can be done. The other thing that we are looking at is that, so the key is that you have to be repeatable, right? This process has to be repeatable. So as new RIs and SPs come in, we procure more. Through our automation, we are able to add that to the tool, and we can get proper allocation for the same. So the next piece, how we are doing this. So once Scalability is a showback tool, with Apptio we are using something called a bill of IT, another tool that's where we are taking all those inputs. I showed you one input, but there are multiple inputs that we have. And those inputs includes your cost that's coming directly from AWS, or the vendor, right? The cost that's coming through these reserve and savings plans. Then you've got shared costs, Transit Gateway, for example, or all your SaaS providers, your enterprise support, and you add all those costs. We have modeled those costs in the tool itself. And another day, when I mentioned earlier partnerships, right? Finance team has got access to this, and they can take the data and add to their finance systems to the charge back to the consumers. Right? We have enabled our finance teams to get the data. It's a push of a button with all the models created to get the data, instead of manually running through spreadsheets, which is very powerful. So with that, I'll pass it back to Ashley to talk about the unit economics.
Thanks. Real quick, I just want to see kind of a show of hands. How many people know what unit economics is? Okay, a couple. That's actually really good. About 4 years ago, I would not be raising my hand. And I'll tell you, it's because I was spending so much time on reservations and optimization that this felt like a stretch goal to get to. And that's exactly what was written in the Cloud FinOps book, that this was nirvana. Now, J.R. Stormont, the executive director of the FinOps Foundation, has rewritten the book. And it's going to be published here in a couple months. And they're shifting that communication because it's no longer the end goal, because we're seeing more people come in for the first time and talking about unit economics and trying to do it at the beginning of their migration, at the beginning of developing an application. So it's really great that Marissa talked about unit metric, because that's really one pillar of unit economics. The second pillar to that is revenue metrics. And when you can combine those two things together, you can really figure out that sweet point of where you're making a profit and you can maximize value. Now, the other thing I like about unit economics is the conversation that it causes. And so instead of going to your engineering team and complaining about them being over budget or asking them for an estimate and they don't know how to do that, right? You shift it to saying, well, let's figure out what the unit cost is. Let's figure out what it costs to deploy this feature. What is the cost to serve a customer so we can do better estimates? And so you change the conversation around dollars so much and around value, which I absolutely love. When I previously worked at a large education company, if you took your AWS certification, you probably took it on that platform. We were really, really focused on trying to figure this out with our K through 12 programs. And so we do assessments in many different states. And I was really curious, like, does it cost more for a student to take a test in this state compared to this state? Does it make a difference? Your first assumption would be, no, it probably shouldn't. It's the same platform, maybe slightly different features. And so we did this where we figured out what the cost per active user was. And it was really interesting to see the results, because there was a state in particular that was about 4 times more than other states. And so we started digging into, why is that occurring? What's happening? So a couple things that we found out is there was customer behavior that was occurring. There was retraining that we needed to do so they weren't use the product in the way that they're using it and causing more transaction fees to occur. So we're able to change behavior and reduce our operating costs because of that. The other thing that was happening was an internal problem. It was a process issue. And what was happening is assessment testing is a little bit like Black Friday for us when it comes to K-12. You get a bunch of 6-year-olds or 11-year-olds in a classroom and they have to start a test at 8 a.m. They need to be done in 45 minutes, right? So it's Black Friday. The last thing we want is a bunch of students sitting there and the tool's not working. And so we really value quality, and so you're always having this quality and cost trade-off. And so our engineers thought, well, let's scale everything up, let's pre-warm everything, and let's be ready for this to happen. We were doing weeks in advance. Why were we doing that? We had a breakdown in communication. The frontline product teams were not telling us when these schools and districts were going to start testing. They had the data, it wasn't being received by the engineering teams. So that was an internal process that we could kind of connect that together and reduce that, basically that cost per active student, because we saw that. The other thing that was happening is we were seeing large spend in the middle of summer and there's no students in the classroom. Why is that happening? Come to find out, we were doing a lot of performance testing, which is great. We were improving our quality of our product. Dig a little bit further. We're FinOps people. We love data. We like digging into things. Well, those couple performance environments were being used across all the states, and we maybe didn't need to have all of them performance testing. At the same time, they were being left on 24/7. They were running for 30 days. And so we had some conversations with the performing testing team. How can we change this? So we set up some policies using tagging to shut things down during off hours. We also set up a budget alert. So even if they forgot to switch the tag feature off or someone changed the values, they would at least get triggered, hey, you've gone over your usage hours that you promised you were going to be doing. So that's what I really like about unit economics, is it drives those type of conversations when you can collect those metrics, and they're really kind of fun to gamify as well. Now, with anything, unit economics is, don't try to boil the ocean. It's gonna be overwhelming. So really start slow, and this is definitely like a ripple type of effect. And so you really want to make sure you start small, you work on scaling, you have the right conversations with people, you're going to get more complexity across the business. Everybody's gonna say they're unique, and so you're gonna need to sit down and understand that a little bit better. But all of this really warrants the time so you can understand business value. As part of the FinOps Foundation, we have working groups, and these are members that get together from enterprise companies like Cigna and our partners, and we work on problem solving and put together best practices. We recently launched version 2 of Unit Economics white paper that details more than I can go over in an hour, but I do want to show this one example of how we perceive how unit cost can mature into unit economics. So again, going back to the example that I gave you, if I can figure out what the cost per student is based on my raw invoice, great. That gives me a baseline to start looking at trends and investigating. Now, if I can take that one step further and I figure out what it takes for the cost of scoring that test, rescoring that test, because that happens, creating the report for the parent, and many, many other features, I can bring that together and start having some baseline, so when the next state or the next customer comes in, they can give me some of those numbers, and I can now create better estimates. Or going into the next year, I can ask my customer what they're predicting to do and improve our forecasting. And so that's a really powerful thing. Now you take it one step further using what Vic was saying with bringing in SaaS and labor, and if you're lucky enough, you get revenue data, and you can start discovering unit economics, which allows you to figure out how to set what your profit can be and how to set your pricing as well. So it's a very, very powerful tool. This is an area in the FinOps Foundation that we are keeping an eye on, we're watching, and we're seeing a lot more experts come into the space. I'm gonna go ahead and hand it back to Marissa, that's gonna tell you about other resources that you can look into.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. I love the crawl, walk, run perspective here, because it shows that you don't have to start with everything all at once. Just get started. That is the most important thing. So I do want to make sure that we cover a couple of key resources to help you as you get started and as you mature your FinOps practice along the way. First up, we have the Cloud FinOps book written by J.R. Storman and Mike Fuller. This is a great resource if you're just getting started and really want to learn the foundational elements of Cloud FinOps. There is a second edition coming out soon, but the first edition is available on AWS. Secondly, I encourage you all, if you're not enrolled within finops.org, to join the foundation. Join the conversation. It's a dynamic community. As Ashley mentioned, we're constantly kind of problem solving and tackling new challenges together and coming up with brand new best practices and better ways of doing things. And we want all of your help to try and do that. So if you're not registered, please go to finops.org and definitely do so. Apptio produces a couple of different podcasts that I'd love to highlight. They also look at specific FinOps and cloud cost management challenges and bring in SMEs from all over the globe, really, to discuss them and provide the listener with some tips and tricks on how they can address the same challenges at their organizations. So check out FinOps Fridays, hosted by Nathan Besh, and please check out Cloudbusters, hosted by our own Mallory Boudreau, who may or may not be in the audience today, if you want to say hello to her. And I also want to make sure that you guys are checking out apptio.com, finops.org, and AWS's website. There's a plethora of blogs, ebooks, virtual webinars that have been recorded that can help you along your way as well. This is just a handful, but definitely check out those resources, and I encourage you all to consume them. So with that, we are at the end of our time today, but thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning.